Well, this is kind of fun because the tables are turned because usually, Bob, you are the interviewer. So
I know.
I know, I have fond memories of coming to Family Life Today and talking with you and Dennis Rady. So here I am. I get to ask you the questions now.
I
This is
only hope that I
fabulous.
can come up with as sparkling answers for
Yeah.
you as you came up with for us when you were on
See,
Family Life Today.
already you have. See, you're, you're good at this. Already you have. So you have this new wonderful book, Build a Stronger Marriage. And, when you think of a marriage book, so many times you think, Dear God, let me give this to my spouse so that my spouse will change and get on the program. But so much of it is starting with what is wrong with me?
Mhm.
What am I doing to tear down my marriage? What am I doing? So, how we don't like the advice, like change the person in the mirror. We don't
Right,
like that
right.
advice. How can we start coming to terms with, hey, the person I can change in this marriage is me?
Well, I think we have to, we can look at our track record and say, how have we
Mhm.
done in terms of trying to nag or persuade or bribe or whatever we've done with our spouse?
Yeah.
That probably has not worked well for you. And so
Yeah.
when you come to the point where you go, all of my attempts to try to change the other person haven't worked.
Mhm.
Maybe I need to take on a new strategy. And really in putting this book together, as I talked with the publisher, our goal was to have a resource that a husband and wife, maybe with a mentor couple or with a counselor
Mhm.
or in a small group, would be able to go through not just on their own, but with others who could help speak into marriage issues. Because
Yeah.
if we're honest, we would all say we've all got areas in our marriage that could use some improvement. That's
Yeah.
that's the Pellicanes, that's the Lepines, that's
Everybody.
it's true
Yeah.
for all of us, and we need to just be honest about that because a lot of people are in church looking around and going, yeah, our marriage is tough, but all these other people sure look like they've got it together, and they don't. They don't have it
Mhm.
together any better than you do.
Yeah.
If we can just own up to that and say, let's try to get the help we need from the scriptures and from each other's experiences, I think bringing other voices into the conversation can be a part of what works for change. So it's not just you, it's not just your spouse.
Yeah.
If it is the two of you, I think you can make progress. But if you can add other voices, I think that's really helpful.
If someone's saying, I would like that, but in this age of online church and everything online, and I don't know people like that, what word of encouragement to find that other couple, find that mentor couple?
What I would do is I would look around and I would say, whose marriage do we look at?
Mm.
And we would say, they're a few years down the road from us.
Yeah.
They've been at this maybe a little longer, but we'd sure like to think, based on what we can see, we'd like to think that our marriage 10 years from now could be where their marriage is, what it looks like. And if you can think of two or three couples like that that call them and say, um, would you come over for dinner? We'd love to have you as a guest for dinner. And and then at dinner, say, would there be any way that we could do this maybe once a month, maybe
Yeah.
where we could just connect and have time together? We need another couple who can help walk us through some of the challenges in marriage. And we've got a tool, we got a book we just got that
Yeah.
maybe we can all go through together. Or if you're in a small group could go through this together. Um, if you're in a local church, call your pastor and say, "Can you think of anybody that maybe we don't know anybody? We're new to the church. Can
Yeah.
you suggest an older couple who might be able to take us through a book like this?" I think what most of us do is we just default to, "Oh, I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want to trouble anybody, so I'm not going to do anything." And then our marriage stays stuck in the same patterns that we're in. We've got to get over that hurdle, reach out. And
Yeah.
honestly, most of the people you reach out to would be thrilled to get a call from you, to have dinner with you, and have the opportunity to start to engage with you around marriage stuff.
Yeah, and you think of it like a few months down the road, a few years down the road, they'll probably think, "What would have our life been if we had never
Exactly.
met you?" Like, it's important, but we have to take that first step. Like, we have to be willing, like, ask, seek, knock. Maybe the first person you ask will say, "Oh, I'm sorry," but then the second person you ask will be like, "We would love to."
Yep.
So don't be faint-hearted. Keep looking and keep seeking that, and you do see that the people who ask and who are willing to keep asking until they find that help, they're the ones that really get the help that they need.
I tell younger couples all the time, if you'll just call an older couple and say, in exchange for watching your kids for an evening,
Yeah.
would you get together with us and talk about marriage? And for free babysitting, you'd be
Right.
amazed
Totally what
at
will
what
happen.
That's right.
Heaven and earth are moved. We would love to talk to you. That's great. You talk about there's 3 foundational issues that going into a marriage, that there's the motivations for the marriage, there's the
Mhm.
expectations of the marriage, and the understanding of the purpose of marriage. And I thought,
Right.
wow, these 3 things are so insightful that you have to understand, like, what motivated you to get married? What are your expectations? And what do you think this is for? Because if we
Exactly.
have different opinions about this is gonna go differently. So, I'd love for you to share just expectations. When you and Marianne were first married, you were asleep on a Saturday morning, like at 9 AM, and she found that very disheartening. Why is that?
It's because we had dated for 4+ years, and it had been our pattern all through our dating. If we were together on Friday night and up till midnight, sometimes 1 a.m., just talking, and we couldn't pull ourselves apart, but we had to go back. So I would say, I'll see you at lunch the next day. And I'd go back to my dorm room and I would go to sleep, and I would sleep till 10:30 the next morning, Saturday morning, just sleep in. I loved it. I was refueling my tank, and then we'd
Right.
get up and we'd go have lunch together. Well, this we did this for years. But the first Saturday morning of our marriage at 9 a.m., my wife, who had been awake, now listen, she'd been awake since 6. She'd been for 3 hours while her husband's asleep in the bedroom. She's around the house with nobody to talk to, nothing going on. So by 9 o'clock, she's ready for a little companionship. And she comes into our bedroom and she raises the shades. And I was like, what are you thinking? Who are you? What are you doing here? And I think I said to her, what are you doing? And she could tell that I was not happy. She she lowered the shades and she left the bedroom, and I realized I think I've probably hurt her in some way. So I figured I better get up and go talk to her. So about 10:30 I got up and went and talked to her. I know I should have gotten up sooner than that, but
That's
I fell back
hilarious right
asleep,
there.
okay?
Right.
So I went back out and we had the conversation. She said, when I was growing up on Saturdays, my dad would get up early and he had a to-do list and he would start tearing through his to-do list. And she said, I guess I just in the back of my mind, I thought, that's what Bob will do once we get married. In college he sleeps in, but once we're married, he'll start to be a responsible grown-up. And we had to have a conversation about what that day was going to look like for us and how we were going to navigate that. That's a minor expectation, but
Yeah.
we bring into marriage what we know about the other person, which we could have a long list of the things we know. And then we bring in all of the things we don't know about the other person. That's an even longer list. And marriage is the process of the uncovering of those things we don't know, and some of those take us by surprise, and we expected it to be different and now it's not, and we've got to figure out what are we going to do with this and how are we going to work our way through it. So those expectations are a big part of what can lead to conflict later on in a marriage.
It's so interesting too, though, that you guys had the foresight even then to, like, talk about it in that way. Like, that she was able to say, "Oh, this is not what I expected. My dad would be up." Like, that was really good that she was able to figure that out.
Yeah, yeah. The fact that she could pull back and say, "Well, where did that idea come from?" and
Yeah.
and be able to do the analysis, I think, was helpful. And I was just saying, again, after 4 years of a different track record, why did you think this was what it would be? And she had to go. That's a good question because you had never demonstrated that getting up on Saturday was going to be a
Ah,
part of this
it's like, "Have you ever
relationship.
seen my face before 11 o'clock in the
Exactly.
morning? Why would you think you'd see my face now that we're married?"
Right.
Another thing that you talk about, in those 3 expectations, it's the 3 things, the motivations, expectations, it's the understanding of the purpose.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, I think, Christians in the church, we would say, well, the purpose of the marriage is to make you happy, to make
Mhm.
you feel not alone, for you to have someone, for you to have someone to be there for you, to be happy. But that's not necessarily the main purpose and reason of marriage. And you asked some pastors to ask about, like, Bible verses about
Right.
marriage that weren't the popular marriage kind of Bible verses, and one of them came up with a verse, Psalm 34:3, "Oh, magnify the Lord with me, let us exalt his name together." What in the world does this verse have to do with being married?
Well, I remember when the pastor said, "This is my marriage verse," and I'd
Yeah.
heard the verse before,
Mhm.
but I'd never applied it in a marriage context. And all of a sudden, I thought, this one pastor said, I used this verse when I proposed to my wife.
Mm.
It was our birth, and I said, when I was proposing to Mary Ann, I was proposing with the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
It's going to make it that much better when we could say goodnight and stay together. Wouldn't it be nice? That those were my kind of proposals. But I was thinking when we got married, I was thinking it's going to be wonderful to live with somebody who thinks I'm special.
Mhm.
Honestly, I that
Yeah.
was not I didn't say that consciously,
Right.
but in the back of my mind, it's gonna be so great to live with somebody who
Yeah.
thinks I'm special,
And this
and
is certainly part of marriage. We're not trying to say that's not, I mean, that's part of the deal, but this pastor's verse, my goodness.
it really all of a sudden said companionship is important, and living with being in a happy, harmonious relationship. I mean, part of the reason for marriage goes back to Genesis 2 when God said it's not good for man to be alone. I'm going to make a
Yeah.
helper suitable for him. So that companionship is a big part of God's design for marriage, but it can't be the ultimate reason for our marriage, because what happens if it's the ultimate reason for our marriage is as soon as there's a day when your spouse isn't making you feel like you're as special as you think you are,
Mhm.
now all of a sudden you're finding yourself unhappy because they're not performing at the right level. But when the two of you are saying, here's why we're really married. We want to see God glorified and magnified, and we want to see his name made great. We want the two of us together to be able to do things in ministry for God, in life for
Yeah.
God, that we couldn't do apart. And so our ultimate goal is not that I would be happy in marriage or that Mary Ann would be happy in marriage, but that God would be happy in marriage. I'm not
Hmm.
saying we should be miserable so that God
Right.
will be happy.
Right.
I'm just saying it's not our happiness that's paramount.
Yeah.
It's God's pleasure that we're seeking. And
Mhm.
when you make that shift in a marriage and say this isn't about us, it's about God, now all of a sudden you recalibrate everything. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, because it just